John War Machine Copenhaver became one of MMA's most recognizable fighters.
War Machine throwing some bombs.
I just thought he had so much potential. I thought John was a star in the making.
They are chanting War Machine.
As he became more famous and people got to know who he was,
War Machine!
He embraced the role of War Machine.
He was a savage.
War Machine!
He was arrogant. He had this presence. It was just over the top and loud, and I never liked that.
I got a phone call, and John said, I got arrested last night. I said, for what?
War Machine's early arrests for assault proved to be a feature, not a bug, for some MMA promotions.
I would get more calls for fights for War Machine than I would any other client.
War Machine!
And then, boom, the reports come out of this horrific incident.
An MMA fighter who goes by the name War Machine is on the run after he allegedly beat up his ex-girlfriend.
They heard screaming, and it sounded like furniture was being thrown around. Several agencies, including the U.S. Marshals, assisted in the arrest.
I didn't believe what I was reading and hearing.
But almost everyone else in the sport isn't surprised.
Damn, I saw this shit coming. And as a friend, maybe I could have done something.
Guilty of battery constituting domestic violence.
Whoever was in his life at that time should have grabbed him and said, dude, what are you doing? Why are you so f***ing angry?
I fight because, to me, it's like the only way I can survive in the modern world.
Was War Machine always a monster on the loose?
F*** those motherfuckers. I f***ing hate 24-hour fitness.
How was he able to hide in plain sight?
Is this what MMA is about? Is this what the athletes do? Is this normal conduct? Lot of questioning going on.
And can talking to the man behind the nickname provide answers?
This is a free call from...
John.
The fighter known as War Machine was not always destined to spend his life in a cage. Growing up in the 90s, John Copenhaver wants to be one of two things when he grows up: an LAPD officer like his dad, or an MMA fighter like Ken Shamrock.
John's father was his hero, and he was really close with his family. Dad was a policeman and oversaw his athletic career and was on top of him for studies. I'm Ken Pavia, and I was John War Machine Copenhaver's agent for the majority of his career.
John and his divorced dad bond over UFC fights, practicing jiu-jitsu moves in the living room. But as a teenager, that relationship is shattered.
John was 13 years old when his dad died in his arms.
This is a free call from...
John.
An incarcerated individual at Nevada Department of Corrections High Desert State Prison.
From the Nevada prison where he's serving a life sentence, John recounts what happened.
We just actually returned from a water skiing trip on the Colorado River, and my dad's on the bed, and his chest was heaving, and I just kind of, I jumped up on the bed and was trying to wake him up, and his eyes popped open, and then he stopped breathing, and then I had to pull him off the bed. And, call 911, and I was doing my best to do CPR. I just fell apart crying.
When his dad passed, the family fell apart.
John is forced to move in with his mother and stepfather.
The mom got in some trouble, had some substance issues. John and his brother had a falling out.
Despite the chaos at home, John remains focused on his own future. His hard work in high school gets him into the Citadel.
The Citadel, the school that John attended, is a highly regarded military school on the East Coast in South Carolina. Very difficult to get in. His dream was to be a Navy SEAL and use the Citadel degree to become a Navy SEAL until he started doing so well academically, and then he changed it up to becoming a pre-med to go to become a doctor.
But 2 years into the program, he discovers he has not left his family dysfunction back in California. as John will later explain to Joe Rogan.
After my sophomore year, I go to the guidance counsel's office and they're like, hey, you owe us $15,000 from this year. I was like, well, how? My mom gets my dad's pension. He was a cop. They get the money every month. Turns out my mom spent all the money on drugs.
Learning the money left to him by his dad has been squandered and he'll have to leave the Citadel drives John into an uncontrollable rage.
So then I went into meltdown psycho mode. And I went home, dude, and I beat my stepdad almost to death. I almost killed him. I beat him bad. Like, there's blood in the ceiling. I smashed him so bad.
John avoids being charged for the sudden violent outburst, but being forced to leave the Citadel changes him forever.
That betrayal was huge. I can't imagine what his life would have been had that not happened. I'm Julio Bazan, former MMA fighter and former roommate of John War Machine Copenhagen.
When he grew up, he had said he had two dreams. He wanted to either be a Navy SEAL or a UFC fighter. And he went the Navy SEAL route until he couldn't, and then went to the second option.
That second route leads him to San Diego and the closest thing in MMA to military college, Ken Shamrock's academy, the Lion's Den.
The Lion's Den was developed to bring guys in and challenge them mentally and physically to a point to where they want to quit. And if they don't quit, I can train them. Hi, I'm Ken Shamrock, UFC, heavyweight, champion, and of course, the godfather of MMA.
It was crazy because, like, that was my dad's favorite guy. I like toys. He liked Ken. And then, he's like, oh, I can see one day you can get a belt like Ken Shamrock. And I remember I was awestruck, but I was nervous.
When I first started working with him, I liked him. I felt like he was a young man who had been dealt some bad cards. He was struggling early in life, a lot like some of the things that I went through early on.
Ken credits his turnaround to Bob Shamrock, the man who brings Ken into his home, then adopts the troubled teen.
I was angry at the world. I didn't respect anyone. And this world that I got into when I was lost helped me vent my anger and frustration.
To try and help pay it forward, Ken gives John a place to stay, hoping to nurture the best parts of his personality.
I knew that he had that light and that personality and that kindness, but he was also a killer if he wanted to be, which is what I was. We learned how to control that. We learned how to put it in the right places.
But while John shows promise as a fighter, in training he struggles to keep his anger and frustration in check, often breaking down emotionally in front of Ken and his teammates.
He would just, literally just cry, break down and cry. And it was like, John, it's like, there's nothing wrong with where you're at right now. I was like, it's a different story when you're starting to work against guys that have much more training and better skill level, even though your abilities and your upside is much higher than theirs. But you ain't there yet. And trying to get him to understand that was very difficult because he wanted to come out of the gates fast because he felt like he could beat anybody. And that's the mentality you have to have, but you got to have somebody around you that's saying, hold up for a minute, we'll get you there.
For 2 years, John sticks with Ken's strict training. That changes after John spends a night at the Hard Rock Hotel in Las Vegas, partying with UFC fighter Phil Baroni.
Phil Baroni's not a good guy. I'm Matt Serra, former UFC champion and UFC Hall of Famer. He's a Long Island guy like myself. Never been a good guy.
Looking back at it, Phil was one of the first real characters, right? He'd go out with the silk suits and the shorts, and, the walkouts were always with his dance moves, It's always kind of cool.
Million stories, none of them good. I never liked him. I don't like him. And the fact that War Machine was hanging out with him, and that's his buddy.
Phil was nice to me, and, I was telling him how, about training and how, I kind of was looking for something different at the time because the Lion's Den was kind of in shambles at that time.
When John signs on with Phil, he embarks on a different path to professional MMA than Ken's stringent academy. Phil's focus is as much about building stars as training martial artists.
Few people understood the importance of being marketable, and Phil Baroni was one of the first ones. Everybody knew him as the New York Badass.
He had the glasses, he had the swagger, the cockiness.
Never a lack of flamboyance see.
To John, Phil's approach sounds like a refreshing change from Ken and a faster path to going pro.
He could taste that money and he could taste that stardom. And I think when some guys get to that point, there's other people in their ear at the same time saying, you're great, man, you're great. You don't need this, you don't need that. And I think John was done waiting and he wanted to do it now. And I don't think it necessarily was a bad move, but I don't think it was the best move. He had all the potential in the world, but he made a couple bad decisions and he ended up where he at because the people you surround yourself with are the people you become.
And John quickly becomes more like the New York badass by acquiring a nickname of his own.
John was a true warrior, and Phil respected that. Phil used to beat him up when he used to come to the gym in Vegas. He used to kick the daylights out of him, kick the crap out of him. And because he kept coming back, he earned the name War Machine.
Phil also gets John his first taste of competitive MMA fighting in Total Combat, an unregulated Wild West promotion in Tijuana, Mexico.
There was no commission. There was no doctors necessarily ringside. Everybody's kind of in one room for the locker room, and it was gangster. It was a little bit ghetto, but it was ground roots, you know, and if you go down to TJ and get a couple wins, your record looks better.
And John does just that by putting together a string of impressive wins.
He was a savage. He was a solid kickboxer that had extremely hard leg kicks.
And he wins fans with the swagger and bad boy antics he learns from Phil.
Everybody there was yelling out War Machine. I was like, damn, this is a movement. This is kind of cool.
But as his local celebrity status grows, the darker, angrier parts of John's personality also begin to flourish.
I mean, if you saw how John lived his life, he was a war machine, you know? You didn't want to have beef with him at a stoplight. You didn't want to bump into him, go walk into the bathroom at a restaurant, or any situation, right? He was not going to take anything from anybody, and he never did.
After being nicknamed War Machine by his mentor Phil Baroni, John Copenhaver finds early success fighting in gritty Tijuana clubs. John memorializes his cultivated tough guy persona by getting tattoos to reflect who he wants to be in the cage.
I think he got the grenade and a couple other things as a result of the nickname. He gravitated towards it because as he became more famous and people got to know who he was, he embraced the role of War Machine.
While the recognition might be good for John's career, his longtime agent finds this new persona concerning.
I worried about John Copenhaver all the time. He was always on the verge of something bad happening. John was always one step away from it.
He's also just a step away from his first big break in the MMA world. After another fighter gets injured, the UFC brings John in as his replacement on the 6th season of the Ultimate Fighter reality show, with its chance at a UFC contract.
So I was excited for him. I was like, this is going to be it. This is going to be his stepping stone.
But when he starts training on the show with former UFC champion Matt Serra, the frustration and insecurity that worried Ken Shamrock starts to reveal itself.
I hear you, but what's the answer though? Not to roll with him? I want you to have the right attitude about it, man. You got a question to ask me, ask me.
War Machine was the type where if things didn't go his way, he was looking for someone to blame. And, you know, that's a problem. That's a big problem. In this game, in the fight game, the mental part of the game is just as important as the physical. If you don't have it upstairs, you know, it doesn't matter what you bring to the table physically. It might get you through some fights, but it's not going to bring you very far.
On The Ultimate Fighter, John reveals what drives his anger, helping to make him a sympathetic character on the show.
I fight because, to me, it's like the only way I can survive in the modern world. I don't have anything. I don't have a dad, a mom. I don't have, you know, no one really cares about me.
People actually love the emotional part of the show from him. He's somebody to root for, you know?
My dad was like in bed, like breathing all crazy, bro. I was like, what the f? Then he just stopped. Dude, I like pull him off the bed, like give him CPR, dude.
You?
Yeah.
How old were you?
13.
No way.
Sucked, dude.
You got somebody that's had the toughest of the toughest, and he's gonna make it, you know? And he's not scared to show his feelings, and it just, you know, made him real. It made him real.
The Ultimate Fighter was his platform. The Ultimate Fighter was getting really good ratings at the time. A lot of people were watching it, and The Ultimate Fighter made John mainstream.
The show also seems to help make John more receptive to training, something his team's coach starts to notice.
Awesome, War. Awesome. Beautiful, bro. Doing good, War. You're growing on me, War. Kind of like a ringworm, but you're growing on me.
John's also growing on the audience. So even after he loses his first fight, the producers offer him a chance to compete in the finale. The catch? He'll fight castmate and friend, Jared Rollins.
Jared actually was a close friend of his, and he had mixed feelings about fighting his friend.
I mean, we were even hanging out after the show, so when we got that call, it was bittersweet, because it's like, oh, like I gotta fight J-Rock, I don't wanna fight J-Rock, you know what I mean? But then, it's a second chance.
After 4 years of training and fighting in low-rent Tijuana clubs, John now has a second chance to fight in the UFC.
So he had worked so hard for that. And Jared was a tough guy, and we knew that going in there. But it really felt like that fight was what we were working for, you know?
Set to begin. What started in the house and will be finished here inside the octagon.
Oh, it was a wild one.
The fight is an Ultimate Fighter classic.
Pushes forward. And with a multi-clinch, a big knee.
Did an up and over and ended up mounted and beat him up from there.
Oh, he switches. Look at that.
And it was a bloody battle, and it went back and forth, and it kind of tore at him a little bit to have to punch his friend in the face.
2 minutes into the third round, John wins with a sensational knockout.
I remember when they raised his hand and interviewed him, he was crying because he was so affected by what he had to do to his friend.
It breaks my heart, man, because I wanted to see him win too, and it's makes me sad, dude.
That's where you see the good part of War Machine, when he was upset that he had to beat up his buddy.
For his outstanding performance, John earns the Fight of the Night award and the $30,000 cash bonus that goes with it.
That was his night. You know, he stood out in a night of some fun fights, and he got Fight of the Night, and deservingly so.
He also gets a 10-fight UFC contract. War Machine is now at the threshold of MMA stardom.
I think everybody recognized that John was going to be a star. When he first got into the UFC, the fame had really taken over.
We'd walk in the mall, and he'd be stopped by everybody, and couldn't feel the ball rolling. I was like, this is kind of cool.
You know, some people in this game, they come up with nicknames and stuff like that, and sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't. For some reason, you know, maybe it's because he had a grenade tattooed on his neck, but War Machine kind of fit him.
Enough that he legally changes his name to War Machine. But by now, John Copenhaver is not a Dr. Jekyll becoming Mr. Hyde. He's Mr. Hyde becoming an even darker Mr. Hyde.
I remember seeing him doing some rants online.
Oh, I want to smash the motherfucker.
I mean, whoever was in his life at that time should have grabbed him and said, dude, what are you doing? What are you saying? Why are you so angry? You're winning in life now. You're doing well. Why are you so angry?
Perhaps because leaning into the angry War Machine character initially brings admiration rather than condemnation.
It changed everything. All of a sudden, I got porn star chicks writing me on MySpace. They want to hang out. It goes to your head, man. It's like a drug. You're on top of the world. You know, it's a trip.
Once we believe the myths about ourselves, that you're untouchable, that you're actually the War Machine, you start to believe that. You start to believe that you're some sort of genius. I'm Julie Kedzie, and I am a former professional mixed martial arts fighter, and I was in the first generation of women who fought in the UFC. You kind of forget that there's still gonna be somebody who doesn't know what the hell you do or care.
And the cage can quickly remind you of your vulnerabilities. After John loses his first UFC fight in just 56 seconds, his career is instantly on life support.
He knew if he lost another one, they was gonna let him go, so that the matchup was extremely important. This matchup has to be right. We had some names thrown at us, and he didn't like them.
Brandon Wolf was a top prospect coming out of Hawaii, and Hawaii has produced a lot of really good fighters, and there was high expectations, and John knew that, and John thought they were putting John's star power up with this new Hawaiian up-and-comer, and it felt like he should have been built a little bit before he took big fights, high-profile fights, and as such, he didn't want that fight.
But in the UFC, despite John's rising popularity with fans, 0-1 fighters don't get to pick and choose their opponents.
When you first entered the UFC, you had zero leverage in terms of opponents, money, or anything like that. You had to just kind of be a company guy.
That doesn't stop John from waging war against the UFC's matchmaker.
I was crazy. I started texting Joe Silva, the matchmaker, and started threatening him. And, me and Joe Silva were going back and forth, and he's telling me, have fun working at McDonald's and all this stuff. We were going back and forth.
John next takes his battle with his employer to social media, where he implies recently deceased fighter Evan Tanner was driven to suicide by the UFC.
And Dana told me, and he said, listen, dude, this is a business, and the things you said, they hurt our brand, and you're making the UFC look bad, and you're one of our fighters. You're going to reap what you sow,
In September 2008, after just one fight, the UFC terminates John's contract.
I think right after the UFC cut him, John and War Machine kind of melded into one a little bit. There was less of a puppeteer and a persona, and he started to believe the hype. He started to believe who he was, and that's when problems started happening.
He tries to keep his MMA career alive by taking whatever fights he can. But as his fight career fades, his frustration grows until a bar-room brawl with a friend gets him arrested. Nearly broke, he's presented with an employment opportunity he sees as a good fit.
John struggled to make ends meet like a lot of early fighters. He didn't have a secondary income necessarily, and he stumbled into the opportunity to do porn and kind of fit the whole War Machine persona.
Yeah, he was always a womanizer, always had girls around, and, he had met a girl that was into porn, and, they would hook up every once in a while. And she kind of introduced him into the industry. I didn't think he'd follow through, but he did. And it was a little different. It was kind of a shock.
But while his War Machine persona may have worked with co-workers in the MMA world, it doesn't sit well with some colleagues in his new industry.
He was arrogant, he was demonstrative, and he would suck up all the air in the room. Hi, everybody. I'm Jenna Jameson. I'm best known for being the world's most famous porn star. He had this presence where when he would speak, it was just over the top and loud. And I never liked that.
He may not be liked in the porn business, but it's his arrest at a gay bar that could cost him everything.
And I said, what were you doing at a gay bar?
With his part-time job acting in porn not earning him enough to pay the bills, John Copenhaver tries to make some quick cash working at a gay bar.
I got a phone call, and John said, I got arrested last night. I said, for what? And he said, well, I got in a fight at a gay bar. And I said, what were you doing at a gay bar? And he said, bottle service. I go, what are you talking about? And he said, I got to wear chaps, and I get to serve champagne to rich gay guys, and I'm making $1,000, $2,000 a night. He said, I'm not gay.
For me, it was a great place to meet chicks. Like, gay bars were the best place to meet girls. You know what I mean? Because all the gay guys bring their girlfriends with them.
But not every woman in a gay bar is looking to have a straight man hit on her. When a bouncer asks John to leave the women alone, he explodes.
I said, well, how'd you get arrested? And he said, as I was leaving, he said to me, hey, we're getting complaints because girls are coming in to not go to clubs, not be hit on by guys, and they're saying that you're hitting on them, and I'm getting complaints. And John said, well, maybe I am, maybe I'm not, but what are you gonna do about it? And the bouncer advanced towards him, and John said, I don't know if he can fight or not. He looked tough, and I wasn't gonna wait and find out, so I hit him. And I dropped him.
When John goes to court for the incident, the prosecution brings forward a slate of past charges, the majority involving fighting and violence. The judge sentences John to a year in prison.
It was tough, having him go away for some dumb shit that he didn't have to do. It's always so unnecessary, but I'll never forget when he told me, he was like, if I get locked up for a long time, forget about me. He said, because I'm not going to be the same person. He said, I'm going to change.
Before he's locked up, John takes to Twitter to criticize the judge and the legal system, announcing that War Machine will always be back.
He was, saying crazy things, just trying, almost as if he was intentionally trying to be controversial to get as much attention as he could.
It works. John's 12 months behind bars gain him street cred with his online followers and sports media.
Just about everything that he posted seemed to get play with the MMA media. They were just eating it up.
By the time he completes his sentence in 2011, MMA promotions see an opportunity to cash in on War Machine's notoriety.
I think that the prison sentence and the legal problems just enhanced his image and his persona. I would get more calls for fights for War Machine than I would any other client. And if you're a small show in Montreal or in Sweden or in Mexico, you want promotion, you want publicity. And if you were able to book War Machine, you'd get 200% more phone calls from media for a small show that would never be noticed.
Bellator, the MMA promotion that just signed a deal to replace the UFC on Spike TV, is also interested in capitalizing on the buzz around War Machine.
I remember when word that War Machine's release from jail was imminent, they were all over me, and they offered him a contract significantly bigger than entry-level guys, and they really, really wanted him because every hero needs a bad guy, and there has to be a villain for a good story, and War Machine was a high-profile villain.
But inside Bellator, one executive, Sam Kaplan, is concerned about signing him.
He's an above-average fighter, but we've got plenty of other fighters we can recruit into our organization that are not going to be the potential liability that he is. My name is Sam Kaplan, and from 2009 until 2014, I was the matchmaker for the Bellator Fighting Championships. There is that constant pressure for ratings. It's like red meat feeding it to the lions. And sometimes, morals and a belief system doesn't apply. They'll just take the ratings any way they can get it.
Over Sam's misgivings, Bellator leans into John's War Machine persona, shooting a Spike TV promo with John visiting his old prison. They also allow him to play the victim.
He came at me. I'm a professional fighter, but I'm still a human.
I felt that it was a distasteful practice how they presented it. I almost felt like they were glamorizing it. They were trying to portray him almost as like a political prisoner. And it's like, this is not Nelson Mandela. This was a guy that was a habitual line crosser and was tried and convicted. I think that there was a lot of equity built up for War Machine to the Spike TV audience, having come through the Ultimate Fighter pipeline. And that was the most recognizable name for them.
While he prepares for his return to Spike TV, he also gets approached for a high-profile return to porn.
He was approached by a major publication, and they said, would you do a photo shoot for us? And he demanded a number in terms of money, and they said yes. And he said, I got one of the requests. I do it with Christy Mack, who at the time was probably the preeminent porn star, very famous. And they approached her, and she agreed to do it.
As Christy later told Holly Randall, while she's apprehensive because of his reputation, John surprises her at the photo session.
At the shoot, he was like, hey, I'm a little worried, that you're not feeling well. Can I come and check in on you later? And I was like, oh, that's very nice, actually. Like, that'd be great. Mm-hmm. You can come over to my hotel room, but we're not having sex. And he said, okay, that's fine. Let me bring you some food, make sure you're okay. And so he did. And we just kept in contact. And my mom was like, wow, that's a really nice guy.
They hit it off, and they started dating. And he brought Christy to these fights.
Christy Mack, War Machine's girlfriend, watching cage side.
Christy helps boost War Machine's image in the MMA world.
I think dating a porn star raises anybody's status because you automatically are looked at as more masculine, more virile, a stud. And that's what a lot of fighters long for. They just want to look like the manliest man out there. So if they can bag a hot porn star, come on.
With Christy helping to boost media interest in John's Bellator fights, their gamble on signing the controversial fighter seems to be paying off.
In the minds of some people, yes, all press is good press. It brought some more eyeballs and some notoriety and coverage to our events.
John makes quick work of his first Bellator opponent, Blazavina, with a first-round knockout. So Bellator greedily books him for 2 more Vegas fights. John and Christy become a talked-about couple in town.
War Machine's relationship with Christy, when it was good, was 2 alphas coming together. And so by dating somebody who was a big celebrity and bringing in a different fan base, it just made War Machine even that much bigger. And they both had significant social media followings.
Their followers get to witness their edgy and often disturbing online banter. Then John documents his connection to Christy with a real-world gesture, and Christy reciprocates.
he gets that big tattoo across his neck. And it made me question everything about his relationship, his mental state, what was next for him.
The MMA media have questions of their own, and John and Christy's response is unsettling.
And if things don't work out for, God forbid any reason, you could just say you're a Mac, like you're a Mac daddy.
Yeah. By his forward, what I would do is I would just kill her. I'll go, rest in peace, Max. Then I was like, this is a memorial to my dead girlfriend. They don't know what happened to her. She's dead.
I mean, honestly, I would probably deserve it.
Yes, I did see it. It says property.
While the couple is intentionally trying to be provocative in public, privately, they're increasingly blurring the line between illusion and reality.
You could tell that. They were on and off with each other. There were reports that they were getting physical in the media.
They came over to the house. So John, Christy, Phil Baroni, and his wife come over from have drinks. I remember when we were there, she had made a comment that was sexually inappropriate, I guess. I'm not sure what it was. Don't remember. But I remember him grabbing her by her hair. She had taken it as, like it was in a playful way. And he kind of knew this isn't the situation for it. He knew he was kind of at my house, didn't want to disrespect the house or anything. So he kind of addressed it in a playful way. I remember thinking, oh shit, this is not gonna end well.
I was very afraid of him. But I did make the decision to leave, and I started seeing another guy. I cut it off with him.
And then, boom, the reports come out of this horrific incident.
They say they heard screaming, and it sounded like furniture was being thrown around. Several agencies, including the U.S. Marshals, assisted in the arrest.
On August 8, 2014, John War Machine Copenhaver uses an old key to enter ex-girlfriend Christy Mack's apartment. He finds her in bed with a friend. John flies into a rage and sexually assaults Christy, leaving her with 18 broken bones in her face, missing teeth, a fractured rib, and a ruptured liver, nearly killing her.
I jumped in my car and drove to her house. It gives me the chills. Obviously, she wasn't there, but there were a lot of people there, and everybody was so afraid for her. Everybody was scared that she wasn't going to make it.
An MMA fighter who goes by the name War Machine is on the run after he allegedly beat up his ex-girlfriend, Christy Mack.
I know John, and I know that he cared about Christy, and I didn't believe what I was reading and hearing.
Damn, I saw this shit coming. And as a friend, maybe I could have done something. I don't know. I just felt bad. I felt bad, but also disgusted.
John flees before police arrive, and for a week, despite a nationwide manhunt involving U.S. Marshals and the Department of Homeland Security, he evades arrest.
I remember trying to track him down. It was a frenzy of media activity. It was like War Machine Watch. It was like, where's War Machine?
The TMZs of the world, they were trying to put their cameras in front of any fighter or coach that had anything to do with him.
He called me once while he was on the run. I was sick that whole week. I felt horrible. I didn't even know what to ask him. I didn't even want to be on the phone. I mean, after that phone call, we haven't spoken since.
Julio doesn't reveal what John said on the call, but despite hiding from police, John continues to publicly tweet at Christy. Those messages offer a glimpse inside the controlling and abusive relationship many suspect was there from the start.
Early on, I could just tell something was wrong. I could feel it. She would cower. Even though he wasn't doing anything in front of people, you could see she was very careful about her words. That is total abuse victim behavior.
Even now, John still seems to somehow blame Christy for provoking his attack by not quitting porn back when they were still a couple.
The real problems came in, her doing things like coming home with with dried semen on her neck. You know what I mean? And you know, where it was disrespectful to me in the sense of, like, I know what you do, but I told you, you know, take a shower after work before you come home.
They love bomb. They groom you. They make you work for their affection. And girls like Christy and me fall victim to that, where we're always trying to please our partner. And until you're able to recognize that pattern, it continues. And it usually turns into something incredibly ugly, violent, and scary.
As it becomes increasingly clear that they've promoted a domestic abuser for half a decade, the MMA world quickly distances itself from John. Bellator immediately cancels his fighting contract.
The reports came out, and that was it. He was gone. It was all done behind the scenes and done very quickly and expeditiously, and there wasn't much talk.
Even as he evades capture, this much too late response to John's long-standing behavior begs a bigger question. How was the magnitude of his behavior kept under wraps for so long?
Up until that point, there wasn't much publicity towards John Koppenhaver being violent towards women. People were just appalled. I think that there was some finger pointing going on that, hey, you know, is this what MMA is about? Is this what the athletes do? Is this normal conduct? Is it acceptable? Were there warning signs? Lot of questioning going on.
On August 15th, 2014, 1 week after the Las Vegas attack, police used John Koppenhaver's tweets to trace his location. And finally apprehend him over 300 miles away in Simi Valley, California.
Witnesses tell me they saw police with their guns drawn and the MMA fighter in handcuffs. Koppenhaver will now be transferred back to Las Vegas, where he is facing a number of charges.
In the 2 years before his trial, War Machine is still able to leverage his bad behavior. His Twitter followers start the Free War Machine movement, while others openly blame Christy for what happened by rationalizing John's actions.
She wanted him to come over and
Maybe, but I still think it's
the thrashing was more than she expected to happen.
Maybe. Here's a woman trying to make sense of it, defending the War Machine.
John's supporters attacked Christy's credibility, many insisting that due to her profession, she reaped what she sowed.
When this whole thing happened, it was in 2014, and that was a different day and age. I think that society as a whole at that time really looked down upon porn stars. They were saying maybe she deserved it. She's a porn star. They were victim blaming on every level, and that is so disgusting.
At the trial, John and his legal team seem emboldened by the support, and his lawyer presents a defense only his Twitter followers could get behind.
The attorney was basically saying that if you're a porn star, you're giving unilateral consent to anyone to do whatever they want to you. It was one of the most offensive, appalling criminal defenses that I can imagine.
Christy refuses to be intimidated.
The fact that Christy was able to go to court, get up on the stand, show her face, and explain exactly what happened to her took the most strength I think I've ever really seen. And she was able to express herself so eloquently.
On the very public witness stand, Christy tells a harrowing story of brutal violence, one that starts with an attack on her friend.
So they're both on the bed, and Corey's just laying down, and John just starts hitting him. Eventually, they start rolling around and fall to the floor.
John then begins the vicious assault that comes close to ending Christy's life.
I could taste blood in my mouth, so I knew I had been hit in the face. I remember waking up on the floor. I was laying on my back, and he was sitting next to me and going through my phone. Anytime he would see something that he didn't like someone I had followed on Instagram, he would hit me. I don't know how many times he hit me. He had a knife. It was one of my kitchen set knives. It was a black handle with silver rivets. And
He would push it into my ear. He would push it into my hand. He sawed off my hair. He cut up all of my wigs because he always hated my wigs. He cut my head.
Based on Christie's testimony and other physical evidence, the jury returns a verdict.
We, the jury, in the above titled case, find the defendant, War Machine, a.k.a. Jonathan Copenhaver, as follows. Count 1, guilty of battery constituting domestic violence.
John Copenhaver is found guilty on 29 felony counts, including kidnapping and sexual assault. The jury deadlocks on 2 attempted murder counts. He is sentenced to life in prison.
I'm gonna try not to be spicy, but I think that War Machine is exactly where he belongs. But good riddance, War Machine.
7 years into his sentence, John claims to see the error of his ways and is seeking an appeal.
I hate the person that I was. I hate the way that I treated Christy. I hate the way that I treated people. I hate the way that I thought. I don't go to parole until I'm like 73 years old, so if I don't win my appeal, then, that's a non-issue. I'm going to be old or dead. But, prison sucks. It sucks in every way possible. But I deserve prison. I deserve hell even more. But I reconcile my life to the Lord. And He's the one that judges everyone.
To steal the old phrase from Charlie Murphy from The Chappelle Show, he was a habitual line crosser. You keep putting yourself in that situation, it's hard to expect leniency and mercy. He's where he needs to be. Raping her multiple times during that encounter, breaking her bones, her ribs, lacerating her liver, multiple face fractures, allegedly going for a knife to try to really finish the job. You look at the pictures of Christy Mack, it's just a horrific beating.
Outside the courtroom, the case shines a light on what critics perceive to be MMA's domestic violence problem. But John's sentencing is not the wake-up call that ends the problem.
There's a lot of misogyny in this sport. We bathe in toxic masculinity in this sport. And eventually, stuff like this happens, and it's all the talk of the internet for a couple days, and then people move on.
Major MMA promotions claim to have a zero-tolerance policy on domestic abuse. But since John's conviction, many top-level fighters have been accused of violence against women. In 2021, John Jones was charged with domestic battery against his fiancée. And in 2024, Conor McGregor was found liable for sexual assault. John's mentor, Phil Baroni, is charged with murdering his girlfriend in Mexico.
Phil Baroni for what he did. These guys. But also, they're in a system that allowed them to get far enough for people not even to see that happening.
As the UFC grew into this mainstream attraction, the UFC cared a lot less about stuff like that. Instead of getting in front of it and saying, this is terrible, you will never put your hands on the women, or cutting a fighter, they would say, let's let the legal process play out. It was a cop-out, essentially. It was a cop-out.
F us. Like, f all of us for being a part of that. I don't think MMA is the reason that these people are bad people. But I don't think it helps the MMA community that we don't prevent people like this from getting to this point.
Office. And where am I supposed to sit? On the floor. You're the chairman, Del. You're Smobel. You're the face of the company in the field. You're the outreach. The outreach? That's a fancy word for the bloke who carries the boxes, isn't it? Del snorted. Anyway, never mind the mahogany. Have you seen the fans? The fans, all 200 of them, were currently occupying the balcony, covered by a suspicious-looking tarp. They were the industrial-sized units Del had mentioned, and they did indeed smell faintly of canal water. We need a marketing strategy, Rodney, Dell said, his eyes lighting up. I've been thinking. Trotter's Turbo Chill. It sounds modern. It sounds aerodynamic. Dell, we agreed. Proper consultancy. We're not selling damp fans from the balcony. Rodney slammed his hand on the desk, only to wince as a splinter caught his palm. We're supposed to be advising businesses on efficiency and growth. And what's more efficient than a workforce that isn't sweating like a glassblower's bottom? Dell shot back. I've already made a call. There's a warehouse in Deptford. Their air conditioning has gone caput, and the foreman is a bloke I know called Greasy George. He's desperate. Rodney sighed, the managing director's facade cracking slightly. Greasy George, does he have a legitimate business license? He's got a van and a clipboard, Rodney. In Peckham, that's a conglomerate. Come on, put your executive suit on. We're going to do a deal. Chapter 15, The Great Fan Fiasco. The Deptford warehouse was a corrugated iron oven. Inside, 30 men were moving crates while the air shimmered with heat. Greasy George, a man whose forehead was permanently slick with perspiration, greeted them with the desperation of a drowning man. Dell, thank God. It's 90 degrees in here and the union is threatening to walk out. George wiped his face with a rag that looked like it had been used to clean an engine. Don't you worry, George, Dell said, draping an arm around him. The chairman and the managing director have arrived. Rodney, show him the brochure. Rodney reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper with Trotter's Turbo Chill written in felt-tip pen. These are high-output, industrial-grade circulation units, Mr. George, designed for maximum atmospheric displacement. Will they cool the place down? George asked. Cool it. Dell laughed. George, by the time we've got these beauties humming, your blokes will be asking for thermal underwear. They're that powerful. They spent the next 3 hours hauling the fans from the van into the warehouse. As Rodney plugged the first unit in, he looked at the label on the back. It was in a language that looked vaguely Cyrillic. Dell, these fans, they're from 1974, and they're marked military surplus. Even better, Rodney, Army quality, built to last. Rodney flipped the switch. There was a low, guttural growl, like a hungry wolf. Then a screech that set every tooth in the warehouse on edge. Suddenly, the fan blades began to spin with terrifying velocity. A blast of air cool, but smelling strongly of old fish and diesel erupted from the unit. See, Dell shouted over the noise. Total displacement. Greasy George looked impressed. I'll take the lot. 100 quid each? George, Dell sighed, shaking his head. For a friend, 120, and that's because I like your face. They shook on it as the Trotters drove away. Rodney was already doing the math in his head. 24,000 pounds. Dell, That's almost, well, after the cost of the fans, that's a 15,000-pound profit in a single afternoon. Told you, didn't I? Rogers, Del beamed, slapping the dashboard of the Capri. The chairman knows his onions. But then Rodney looked in the rearview mirror. A cloud of black smoke was rising from the dipped Ford warehouse. Del, why is George's warehouse smoking? It's just the dust, Rodney. The fans are so powerful, they're clearing the decades of grime. It's a cleaning service as well. We should have charged him more. Chapter 16, The Legacy. They didn't go back to the warehouse. They didn't answer the phone for 3 days. Apparently, the military surplus fans had a slight design flaw where the motors would overheat if run for more than 10 minutes, and the turbochill had eventually turned into a turboflam. Fortunately, Greasy George had managed to douse the small fires with a fire extinguisher before any real damage was done. But the deal was definitely off. At least we got the deposit, Del muttered, sitting on the balcony as the sun set. We had to give it back. Del, Rodney said, standing beside him. And we had to pay for George's eyebrows to be professionally trimmed since the sparks took most of them off. They stood in silence, looking out over the flickering lights of the city. The 40,000 pounds was still in the bank, safe and sound. The Phase 2 office was currently being used by Damien to build a fortress out of cardboard boxes. You know, Rodney, Del said, his voice soft, we're not millionaires. We're probably never going to be millionaires again. Not the real kind, anyway. I know, Del. But look at us. We've got the flat. We've got the family. We've even got a managing director who knows how to use a stapler. Del looked at his brother and smiled. We're the luckiest blokes in Peckham. Rodney looked at the yellow van parked in the lot below. It looked small and battered, but it was there. Yeah, I suppose we are. But listen, Del said, his eyes beginning to sparkle again. I was talking to a bloke in the pub today. He's got a connection in Singapore. Apparently, there's a surplus of slightly mislabeled, but perfectly edible, canned ham. With Christmas coming up, we could. Del! No, listen, it's a gold mine. Rodney, this time next year. The argument faded into the night air, a familiar melody that had echoed through the halls of Nelson Mandela House for decades. The millions might have come and gone, and the deals might have sizzled out, but as long as the sun rose over Peckham, the trotters would be there trading, laughing, and dreaming of the next big win. Bon mot. The yellow van might be old, and the engine might cough, but as long as there's a road ahead and a deal to be made, the trotters will always be driving, because they're not just traders, they're survivors, and in the heart of Peckham, that's the greatest fortune of all. The Trotter Chronicles, From Gold to Grit, a novelization by Gemini. Prologue, The Man in the Sharp Suit. The air in the office was thick with the scent of expensive mahogany and the faint, clinical aroma of high-end air purifiers. Justin, a man whose skin looked like it had been buffed by a professional at a Swiss spa, leaned back in his leather chair. He adjusted his glasses, looking at the two men sitting across from him. One of them, Derek Delboy Trotter, was a man who looked like he belonged in a very different kind of office one, with a calendar of a local garage on the wall and the lingering smell of cigar smoke and hopeful desperation. Del was dressed in what he considered his business best, a suit that shimmered just a bit too much under the fluorescent lights, and enough gold jewelry to make a pirate blush. Next to him sat Rodney, younger, leaner, and perpetually looking like he had just realized he'd left the oven on at home. Rodney was sweating, not the confident sweat of an athlete, but the cold, clammy moisture of a man who knew his brother was about to say something that would embarrass them both for the next century. "I've got all the basic details about your business career," Justin began, his voice smooth and devoid of any Peckham grit. "But what I'd like to do is to get an insight into the real you, how you started, how you became so successful, but more importantly, your lives and your raison d'etre." Del Boy's eyes lit up. He didn't know what a raison d'etre was, but it sounded French, and in Del's world, French meant class. "Oh, no," Del whispered to Rodney, "Laboratory Garney." Rodney closed his eyes and prayed for the floor to open. "It's not Laboratory Garney. Del," he hissed, "he's asking for our reason for being." "Exactly what I said. Prove," Del snapped back, before turning to Justin with a smile that could sell ice to an Eskimo and then charge him for the delivery. "Well, Justin, where shall I start? Up to a few years ago, we were just very ordinary people living, well, very ordinary lives, weren't we, Rodney?" And so the story began. A story of a watch found in a garage, a fortune made in an instant, and a fall so spectacular it made the Hindenburg look like a minor fender bender. Chapter 1, The Caribbean Dream. The sun over Barbados didn't just shine, it announced itself. It turned the turquoise water into a sheet of diamonds and the white sand into something so bright it hurt to look at without designer sunglasses, which, of course, the Trotters were wearing. Only a few months prior, the Trotters had been living in a council flat in Peckham, wondering if the hooky VCers they were selling would last through the first reel of Rambo. Then came the watch, an 18th century Harrison marine chronometer hidden in their garage for decades. It had sold at Sotheby's for £6.5 million. In an instant, Derek Trotter, the man who once sold one-legged turkeys at Christmas, was a multimillionaire. "Look at this, Rodney," Del had said, leaning over the balcony of their private villa. He was holding a glass of something blue with a miniature umbrella in it. "Total luxury. This is what we were born for. Mange tout, Rodney, mange tout." Rodney was sitting in a hammock, trying to read a book on sociology, but failing because Cassandra kept applying sun cream to his back. It's a bit much, isn't it, Del? I mean, 6 months ago we were sharing a bathroom with a leak that Uncle Albert called characterful. Characterful. It was a health hazard. Del laughed. But look at us now. We've divvied the dosh up. We made sure Uncle Albert got a nice little drink, figuratively speaking, though knowing him, he's probably literally drinking most of it down on the coast with Elsie Partridge. They had been the kings of the island. They donated to charity mostly because Del liked the gala dinners, and they invested. Oh, how they invested. Del had met a man in a bar. A visionary, Del called him. A con artist, Rodney had countered. The man spoke of Central American markets, of vibrant ventures, and emerging economies. He spoke of turning millions into billions. It was a royal mint. Rodney, Del shouted into the tropical wind. We were making money while we slept. But the Caribbean sun has a way of blinding you to the clouds on the horizon. Chapter 2. The Sound of the Crash. The end didn't come with a bang. It came with a phone call and a decline message on a credit card at a 5-star hotel. What do you mean? Insufficient funds, Del had barked at the hotel manager, his gold rings clacking against the marble countertop. Do you know who I am? I'm Derek Trotter. I've got more money than the Sultan of Brunei's paperboy. The manager was polite but firm. The Central American market hadn't just dipped, it had evaporated. A coup, a currency collapse, and a series of creative accounting errors by their visionary friend had turned the Trotter fortune into a pile of worthless digital ash. Rodney, Del whispered, his face turning a shade of gray that matched the London fog they had tried so hard to escape. The negotiations. They've collapsed. Collapsed. Rodney felt his stomach drop. Del, we put everything into that venture. The houses, the stocks, the peacocks. I know. Del said, his bravado finally cracking. We've even paid for this hotel on a credit card. A credit card which has now been withdrawn. The journey back to the UK was a blur of cramped airplane seats and the crushing realization that the dream was over. They weren't returning to a hero's welcome. They were returning to a financial wilderness. And it wasn't just them. Back in Peckham, the ripples of their failure were turning into waves. Michael Fisher, the landlord of the Nag's Head and a man who had trusted Del with his life savings, was now behind bars. He had remortgaged the pub to follow the Trotter gold mine, and when it collapsed, he had tried to recoup the losses by embezzling from the brewery. He was a desperate man, and Del felt the weight of every brick in Mike's prison cell. Chapter 3. The Court of Peckham. The corridors of the courthouse felt like a tomb. Denzel, a man whose nerves were usually held together by habit and hope, was pacing so fast he was nearly burning a hole in the linoleum. Denzel, sit down, Albert's voice echoed. Denzel stopped and looked at the group gathered. There was Trigger, looking as vacant as a Sunday morning in a library. There was Boyke, looking smug despite the circumstances. And there was Sid, the cafe owner, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I can't, Albert, Denzel groaned. I've never been a character witness before. I'm worried. I think those made a terrible mistake having us for here. It's like inviting the Manson family to dinner. Don't be so dramatic, Trigger said, staring at a fly on the wall. I'm going to tell them I hear voices. Trigger, you're not the one on trial, Denzel hissed. I know, Trigger replied simply, but I still hear voices. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was even grimmer. The Inland Revenue was a beast that didn't care about mange tout or lovely jubbly. They wanted their pound of flesh, and they wanted it in sterling. Dell and Rodney stood before the judge. The properties were gone. The cars were gone. The peacocks had probably been repossessed by a very confused bailiff. Are there any mitigating circumstances? Their lawyer asked. Dell stepped forward, adjusting his tie. Oh, yes, you must remember to tell them that we were slaves to detail, wouldn't you? Rodney, we made certain that we always got our checks off to the Inland Revenue on time. Always, Rodney added, his voice cracking. Fair dues, Dell whispered as the judge looked down at them. They bounced, but they was always on time. The verdict was swift. Bankruptcy. They weren't going to prison, not yet, but they were being stripped of everything. The debt stood at $48,750 for pounds. It was a number that haunted those dreams. It wasn't just money, it was the price of his pride. Chapter 4, The Wrong Gentleman. Amidst the financial ruins, a personal tragedy struck. Uncle Albert, the man who had survived the Battle of the Atlantic only to be nearly killed by those cooking 1,000 times, had passed away. The funeral was a somber affair, or it should have been. The Trotters arrived at the cemetery, faces long and hearts heavy. I feel bad, you know, Dell whispered to Rodney as they walked toward the open grave, leaving him here on his own while we was all off globe-trotting. He wasn't on his own, Dell, Rodney said. He had Elsie. He was happy. They stood by the grave, listening to the vicar speak of a man named Bunny who had served in the RAF. Bunny, Dell frowned. Why did he call him Bunny? Well, that's what they called him in the RAF, didn't they? A stranger next to them whispered, because his surname was Warren. Dell froze. He looked at the headstone. He looked at the grieving widow, who was definitely not Elsie Partridge. He looked at the photo of the deceased man who looked remarkably like Albert, but was missing the signature during the war beard. Rodney, Dell hissed, his eyes wide. Is that a Spitfire on the coffin? Yeah, Rodney whispered back. We're at the wrong funeral. They retreated with the quiet dignity of two men who had just realized they were mourning a complete stranger. It was the perfect metaphor for their lives, showing up with good intentions only to realize they were in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong dead relative. Chapter 5, New Management. Back at Nelson Mandela House, the flat felt smaller than it used to. The wallpaper was peeling, and the ghost of their millionaire lifestyle lingered in the form of a single, half-empty bottle of expensive cognac. "The firm's been liquidated," Rodney said, staring at the kitchen table. "Trotter's Independent Traders is no more. It's caput." "No, no, no," Dell said, his mind racing. "The firm can go on trading. It's just that I've been disqualified from running it. That doesn't mean to say I can't work for it." He looked at Rodney, really looked at him. "We need a new managing director," Dell mused. "Someone young, someone enthusiastic, someone full of ideas." Rodney looked around the room. "Who? The window cleaner." "No, Rodney, you." Rodney's jaw dropped. "Me? Dell, I can't run a company. I can't even run a bath without getting a headache. Legally, there is nothing to stop you," Dell insisted. "You're clean. No bankruptcy, no disqualification. You'd be the boss. Rodney Trotter, managing director." And so the power dynamic shifted. Within days, the local paper carried a small advertisement, "Trotter's Independent Traders, now under new management. Managing Director, Rodney Trotter." Rodney took to the role with a terrifying level of seriousness. He started wearing a tie at breakfast. He spoke about executive stress and logistical paradigms. He even tried to listen to Mozart to unwind. Mozart's Symphony No. 38 in D major. Rodney explained to Trigger one evening in the flat. "I find it helps me ease my executive stress." Trigger nodded slowly. "Ain't there no words to this, Dave?" "No, Trigger, it's instrumental." Dell watched his brother with a mix of pride and annoyance. He was back in the game, even if he was technically just the staff. But the debt to the taxman still loomed. They needed a big score. They needed a miracle. And then the phone rang. Chapter 6, The Gold Rush. The studio lights were blinding. Jonathan Ross, a man who seemed to be made of charisma and expensive hair products, smiled at the camera. "Welcome to Gold Rush," he announced, "the fastest game show on TV. This is the show where you can win anything from £1 to 100,000 pounds. In the contestant's seat sat Derek Trotter. He had lied about his hobbies, claiming to love 16th century Italian Renaissance art instead of seeing what fell off the back of a lorry. And he had navigated the early rounds with the cunning of a street fox. He reached the final stages. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knockoff Swiss Army knife. For 50,000 pounds, Derek, Jonathan Ross said, leaning in. Which classical guitarist wrote the opera The Child and The Enchantment? Was it Ravel, Segovia, or Rodrigo? Del felt the sweat prickling under his shimmery suit. He knew this, or he thought he knew it, but his brain was a jumble of French phrases and Peckham market prices. I'm going to have to use me old SOS, aren't I? Del said, his voice trembling. I'll call my brother, Rodney. Back at the flat, Rodney and Cassandra were dressed in their fantasy therapy outfits, Rodney as a gladiator and Cassandra as a police officer. It was supposed to be a quiet night of memory baggage unloading. The phone screamed. Hello, Rodney snapped, assuming it was their annoying neighbor, Mickey Pierce. Piss off, Mickey, you're getting on my tits now. Rodney, it's Jonathan Ross. The silence that followed was deafening. Rodney realized he had just told one of the most famous men in Britain to piss off. Rodney, we need your help, Jonathan said, hurried. Derek is on 25,000, going for 50. Which classical guitarist wrote the opera The Child and The Enchantment? Was it Ravel, Segovia, or Rodrigo? Rodney didn't hesitate. He had to GCEs. He had been listening to Mozart for a week. He was an executive. Ravel, Rodney said with absolute certainty. 100%. Del, it's Ravel. Del turned back to the camera, his chest puffed out. I'll go with that. Jonathan, it's Ravel. Jonathan Ross looked at him with a face full of pity. Derek, that was the wrong answer. It was Rodrigo. The world seemed to stop spinning. Del's face went through every shade of red known to man. He had lost it all. Again. On national television. Chapter 7, The Phoenix of Peckham. The silence in the flat that night was heavy. Del sat on the sofa, still wearing his game show suit, staring at the floor. Raquel was in the kitchen, and Rodney was hiding in his room, probably trying to find a way to dismantle his gladiator armor without making a sound. The phone rang. If that's Mickey Pierce, Del growled, picking it up. I'm going to murder him. Hello, is this Derek Trotter? A voice asked. It sounded professional. This is the producer of Gold Rush. Del rolled his eyes. Oh, give it a rest, Mickey. I can hear the jukebox in the Nag's Head from here. No, Mr. Trotter. This is serious. We've made a mistake. Our researchers checked the facts. Ravel did write the music for The Child and The Enchantment. Even though he's a composer and not primarily a guitarist, the question was flawed. Del sat up straight. A mistake? You mean? I was right? You were right. We're offering you the 50,000 pounds, or the chance to come back and play for the 100,000. Del looked at the room. He looked at Rodney, who had peeked his head out of the bedroom door. He looked at Raquel, who was standing in the doorway with hope in her eyes. Give all the money to charity, Del shouted into the phone, his old bravado returning in a rush of adrenaline. And if you phone here once again, I'm going to come down there and kick your arse into shredded duck. Goodbye. He slammed the phone down. Del, Rodney screamed. What are you doing? That was 50 grand. Del started to laugh. A deep, wheezing Peckham laugh. It was Mickey Pierce, Rodney. I could hear the jukebox. He thought he could wind me up, but nobody winds up Derek Trotter. He stood up, adjusting his cuffs. We're the Trotters, Rodney. We don't need charity. We're back in business. New management, new ideas. This time next year. Rodney sighed, but he couldn't help but smile. We'll be millionaires? No, Del said, throwing an arm around his brother's shoulder. This time next year, we'll be debt-free. And that, Rodney, is bonjour. It's bonjour, Del, Rodney corrected. Exactly what I said. Prove exactly what I said. The neon sign of the Nags had flickered in the distance, a beacon of hope in the heart of Peckham. The Trotters were down, but they were never out. Because as long as there was a deal to be made and a brother to blame, the dream would never die. Chapter 8. The Cold Light of Day. The following morning did not bring the clarity Del Boy had hoped for. Instead, it brought a pounding headache and the lingering suspicion that he might have made a catastrophic tactical error. He sat at the formica table in the kitchen, nursing a mug of tea that was mostly sugar. Rodney stumbled in, looking disheveled. Del, Rodney said, his voice flat. I've been thinking about that phone call last night. Forget it, Rodney. Del snapped. Mickey Pierce, professional wind-up merchant, probably recorded the whole thing to play at the pub later. Low D toilet. Rodney. Water under the bridge. Del, I went to the pub this morning to get some milk because the fridge is on the blink again. And Mickey Pierce was there. He looked as miserable as a rainy Tuesday in Margate. Apparently, his latest business ventures selling laser-cut toast just failed. He didn't even have enough credit on his phone to make a prank call. Del froze, his mug halfway to his lips. What? And there's more. Sid showed me the morning paper. There's a small headline on page 12. Game show blunder. BBC apologizes to Peckham contestant over classical music gaffe. The silence in the kitchen was heavy. You could hear the distant rumble of the 171 bus and the slow, rhythmic dripping of the leaky tap. So, Del whispered, his voice barely audible. It wasn't Mickey. It was the producer. Del, you told the BBC to give £50,000 to charity in the name of the Trotters. Del Boy put his mug down. He stared at the wall, at the framed picture of their mother. Well, he said, his voice suddenly bright and brittle. At least we'll get a plaque, or a mention in the newsletter. It's tax deductible, ain't it? We don't pay tax, Del. We're bankrupt, Rodney shouted. Details, Rodney. Details. Del stood up, pacing the small kitchen. This is just a temporary setback. A minor hiccup in the grand tapestry of Trotter fortunes. We're under new management. Remember, Managing Director Rodney Trotter. What's our first move? Boss. Rodney looked at the pile of unpaid bills on the counter. Our first move is to find something to sell. Something that doesn't involve the Sultan of Brunei or the BBC. Chapter 9, The Electronic Revolution. Rodney's first official act as managing director was to meet with Monkey Harris. Monkey was a man who lived up to his name short, agile, and always looking for a way to climb a bit higher on the social ladder. He met Rodney in the back of a van parked behind the Nag's Head. "I've got a consignment." Rodney, Monkey whispered, opening a cardboard box. "Electronic personal organizers. Top of the range. They tell the time, store 500 names, and have a built-in calculator. They're selling like crazy in the West End." Rodney picked one up. It was a sleek, black plastic device that looked like something from a low-budget sci-fi movie. "How much?" "For you. A tenner apiece. I've got 200 of them." Rodney calculated. 200 at 10 pounds was 2,000. If they sold them for 30, that was for 1,000 pounds profit. It wasn't 50,000, but it was a start. "I'll take them," Rodney said, trying to sound executive. "But I'll need to pay in installments. Cash flow. You understand?" Monkey nodded. "I understand. Cash flow is the soul of business. I'll drop them off at Nelson Mandela House tonight." When Rodney returned to the flat, he found Del Boy trying to fix the washing machine with a bent coat hanger. "Good news, Del. I've secured our first inventory. Electronic personal organizers. The future of business. We're going to modernize Peckham, one address book at a time." Del looked at the device. "Electronic organizers. People round here can barely organize a trip to the toilet. Rodney, who's going to buy these?" "Everyone. Busy professionals, students, anyone who needs to stay on top of their game. It's executive stress management, Del, der chic." "HMM," Del said, his eyes narrowing. "They look a bit plastic. Are they waterproof?" "Why would they need to be waterproof?" "In case it rains on the market stall. Rodney, think of voyageur. Chapter 10. Iconoclastic autosuggestion. While the business world was being revolutionized by plastic organizers, the domestic world of the Trotters was entering the realm of fantasy therapy. Cassandra had insisted, after the stress of the bankruptcy and the game show disaster, she felt their relationship needed a reboot. She had found a book by an American psychologist who spoke of memory baggage and the need to create our own make-believe world. Iconoclastic autosuggestion. Rodney explained to Del Boy while they were sorting the organizers. It's about rejecting reality and becoming different people. Just for an evening. Sounds like what I've been doing for 40 years. Rodney, Del quipped. What's the catch? We write down our fantasy figures, and then we become them. No dressing up. It's all in the mind. But as with everything in the Trotter household, the no dressing up rule was the first to go. Thursday night arrived. Del had agreed to take Raquel and Damien out to see a film, giving Rodney and Cassandra the flat to themselves. Or so Rodney thought. I'm taking them to see that new cartoon, Del said, adjusting his coat, the one about the singing fish. We'll be back late. Enjoy your autosuggestion. Rodney waited until the door closed. He went to his bedroom and emerged 10 minutes later wearing a leather skirt, a plastic chest plate, and sandals. He looked like he had been rejected from a high school production of Spartacus. Cassandra emerged from the bathroom. She was wearing a police uniform, complete with a hat and a plastic truncheon. Rodney, she gasped. I thought we said no dressing up. I couldn't help it. Cass, the book said to fully immerse yourself. I'm Russell Crowe in Gladiator. And I'm a detective from the bill. Cassandra sighed. You look different. Strength and honor, Cassandra, Rodney said, striking a pose that nearly caused his chest plate to pop off. Now, let us unload our baggage. They sat on the sofa, trying to be reborn, but the atmosphere was somewhat dampened by the smell of those lingering cigar smoke and the faint sound of the neighbors' heavy metal music. So, Rodney began, trying to deepen his voice. On my signal, unleash the feelings. Rodney, I don't feel like a detective. I feel like an idiot. That's just the memory baggage talking. Rejected. You are an officer of the law. I am a hero of Rome. Suddenly, the front door burst open. We're back, Del Boy shouted, stumbling in with Raquel and Damien. The cinema was full. Apparently, every kid in Peckham wants to see a singing fish. He stopped dead. He looked at Rodney. He looked at Cassandra. Oh, my God, Del whispered, his eyes widening. Rodney, what have you done to her? Is she arresting you? It's therapy. Del, Rodney hissed, trying to hide behind a cushion. Go away. Therapy, you look like you're about to fight a lion in a police station. Del started to laugh. A deep, wheezing sound. Raquel, come and see this. Russell Crowe and the bill are having a meeting in our front room. The fantasy was officially over. Reality hadn't just returned. It had kicked the door down and started laughing at them. Chapter 11, The Sultan's Shadow. A few days later, the executive stress was reaching a fever pitch. The organizers weren't selling as well as Rodney hoped, mostly because people in Peckham preferred to write their numbers on the back of cigarette packets. Rodney was sitting at the kitchen table, Mozart playing softly in the background, when the phone rang. Trotter's Independent Traders, Managing Director Rodney Trotter speaking, he said, trying to sound bored and important. Good evening, a voice said, with a thick, exotic accent. I am wishing to speak with Managing Director. Rodney's eyes narrowed. This is he. Who is calling? My name is Asif Hazen. I am representative of Sultan of Brunei. Rodney rolled his eyes. He looked at Del Boy, who was pretending to read the paper, but was clearly listening. The Sultan of Brunei, Rodney repeated loudly. Well, how can I be of assistance, sir? His Highness has seen your advertisement in the newspaper. He is very impressed with your party planning and consultancy. Is he now? Rodney smirked. And what does His Highness want? Does he want me to fly out and organize a palace warming? Exactly. He wants you to fly to Brunei. All expenses paid. He has bought a crappy old three-wheeled van, and he wants to know where to start it on cold mornings. Rodney's smirk vanished. He slammed the phone down. Shove it, Mickey, he yelled at the dead line. Just shove it. What happened? Del asked, looking up. Dave's just had a big row with the Sultan of Brunei. It was Mickey Pierce. Del, I could hear the jukebox. He thinks he's so clever, using an accent. But as Rodney sat back down, his Mozart symphony reached a crescendo. He looked at the advertisement he had placed. He had listed consultancy and party planning. It was a professional advert. He looked at the phone. For a fleeting second, he wondered, what if the Sultan of Brunei really did have an old van? What if he really did need a consultant from Peckham? Del, Rodney whispered, do you think? Don't worry, Rodney, Del said, patting him on the shoulder. The world's full of surprises. Look at Nicky Pierce, he's only just learned to read. They sat in the quiet flat, to brothers bound by blood, bankruptcy, and a never-ending cycle of nearly and almost. They were back where they started, in Nelson Mandela House, with a mountain of debt and a box of plastic organizers. But as the neon sign of the Nags had flickered outside, Del Boy looked at his brother. This time next year, Rodney, he said, the old spark returning to his eyes. This time next year, we'll have sold all them organizers. We'll be back on top. Mange tout, Rodney. Mange tout. And in the heart of Peckham, that was enough. Chapter 12, The Ghost of Mickey Pierce. The weight of the charity call hung over the flat like a thick London fog that refused to lift. Del Boy tried to carry himself with his usual swagger, but every time he passed a television, he felt a phantom pain in his wallet. 50,000 pounds gone with a single, ego-driven outburst. I could have bought a new van, Rodney, Del whispered, staring into his lukewarmty. A yellow one, with leather seats, and a heater that actually works. You gave it away, Del, Rodney said, not looking up from his latest business management book. You wanted to look like a big man. Well, congratulations. You're the biggest man in the soup kitchen. Rodney was trying to embrace his role as managing director, but the reality of the market stall was far from the corporate boardrooms he envisioned. The electronic organizers were currently sitting in the hallway, taking up space and gathering dust. We need a marketing strategy, Del, Rodney announced. Standing up. We can't just stand on a street corner and shout. We need to target the high-end demographic of Peckham. Dell snorted. The high-end demographic of Peckham is anyone who's still got all their own teeth. Rodney, just get M down to the market. I'll do the patter. No, I'm the MD. I'll do the patter. You can be the logistics coordinator. The what? Rodney, I've been selling since you were in nappies. I could sell a no-entry sign to a getaway driver. But Rodney was insistent. He wanted to prove he was more than just a bone marrow donor in a cheap suit. He spent the evening practicing his executive voice, much to Raquel's amusement and Dole's irritation. The next morning, the market was bustling. Rodney stood behind the stall, looking stiff and uncomfortable in a trench coat he thought looked professional. Dell stood to the side, arms folded, waiting for the inevitable. Step right up, ladies and gentlemen, Rodney shouted, his voice cracking slightly. Experience the future of personal management. The Trotter 3000 electronic organizer stores 500 names, calculates, tells the time in Tokyo. A woman in a headscarf stopped and looked at the black plastic device. Does it tell me when the 171 bus is coming? Well, no, Rodney stammered. But it can store the bus timetable if you type it in. I can't type, she said, moving on. And I don't know anyone in Tokyo. Del Boy stepped forward, unable to restrain himself any longer. Oi, darling, come back. Don't listen to him. He's just the apprentice. Look at this, it's not just an organizer. It's a status symbol. It shows the world you're a person of substance. And look at doubles as a very stylish paperweight for your betting slips. He grabbed one and held it high. Normally 30 quid, but today, because my brother here has just been released from a psychiatric institute, and I'm feeling sorry for him, 15 quid, for 25. Within 10 minutes, Dell had sold 3. Rodney watched in a mixture of awe and resentment. The executive dream was slipping away, replaced by the familiar grit of the Peckham hustle. Chapter 13, The Road Sweepers Union. As the weeks dragged on, the organizers sold in drips and drabs, but the mountain of debt to the inland revenue remained immovable. The threat of bailiffs was no longer a distant worry. It was a looming shadow that darkened every conversation. Raquel's right, Del, Rodney said one evening, looking defeated. Trigger said they're recruiting down at the depot. Road sweeping. The pay is steady. Del Boy looked like he had been slapped. Road sweeping. Me, Derek Trotter, the man who once had peacocks on his lawn. I'm a trader, Rodney, an entrepreneur. You're a bankrupt entrepreneur. Del, we need money. Real money. Not this time next year money. Del looked around the flat. He saw the peeling wallpaper, the half-empty bottles, and the tired look in Raquel's eyes. The bravado he had worn like armor for decades was finally starting to rust. I'll help you fill in the form, Rodney offered, his voice softening. Me? Del shouted. I wasn't talking about me. You're the one who needs a job. You're young. You're fit. You can push a broom from here to Lewisham. I'm the managing director. Rodney protested. Exactly. And part of managing a company is diversifying your income streams. Now, go on, get the pen and see if they've got any vacancies for a logistics consultant with his own high-vis vest. The tension in the flat was broken by a knock at the door. It was Trigger. All right, Dave, Trigger said, nodding to Rodney. It's Rodney, Trigger. Yeah, whatever. Del, I heard you were looking for a bit of work. My supervisor says he's got a spot on the night shift. It's mostly quiet. Just you and the broom. Gives you plenty of time to hear the voices. Del Boy closed his eyes. The image of himself in an orange vest, sweeping up kebab wrappers at 3 a.m. was the final indignity. Thanks, Trig, Del said, his voice surprisingly quiet. I'll think about it. After Trigger left, Del sat by the window, looking out at the estate. He thought about the watch, the millions, the Barbados sun. It all felt like a dream someone else had dreamt. Rodney, Del said, his eyes still fixed on the horizon. Did I really tell them to give that 50 grand to charity? You did. Del, you were brilliant. The whole country thinks you're a saint. Del smiled, a small, sad flick of the lips. A saint with no shoes, eh? Well, at least I'm a saint. Say lavi, Rodney. Say lavi. Chapter 14, The Final Word. The interview with Justin was drawing to a close. The high-end office felt even more alien now that the story had been told. The mahogany desk seemed colder, the air purifiers more sterile. Justin adjusted his glasses, scribbling a final note in his leather-bound notebook. It's a fascinating journey, Mr. Trotter, from the heights of sudden wealth to the current situation. But tell me, do you regret it? The watch, the investment, the charity call. Del Boy leaned forward. The gold on his fingers caught the light. He looked at Rodney, then back at Justin. Regret it, Del said, his voice regaining its familiar resonance. Justin, my son, life is like a market stall. Sometimes you're selling silk, and sometimes you're selling scrap. But the point is, you're always in the game. Rodney shifted in his seat, looking at his brother with a mix of exasperation and pride. We had the world in our hands for a minute, Del continued. And yeah, we dropped it. But we're trotters. We're like those little rubber balls you get in the 50p machines. The harder you hit us against the pavement, the higher we bounce. He stood up, smoothing his shimmering suit. I've got a warehouse full of electronic organizers that are going to revolutionize the world of personal management. I've got a managing director who's got more ideas than a patent office. And I've got a family that, well, they're the only thing that's actually worth $6.5 million. Justin stood up, offering his hand. Thank you, Derek. It's been an insight. I'll be in touch. As they walked out of the office and into the cool London air, Rodney turned to Del. So, what now, MD? Del Boy looked at the yellow Capri parked at the curb. It was old, it was battered, but it was theirs. Now, Rodney, Del said, his eyes sparkling with a new scheme. Now we go to the Nag's Head. I think I know a bloke who's looking for 200 slightly water-damaged electronic organizers. He's a Lap's laptop salesman, and I think he's a fan of Ravel. Rodney sighed, shaking his head. You never learn, do you? Learn? Rodney, my boy, if I learned, I'd be bored. Mange tout, Rodney, mange tout. And as they drove off into the Peckham sunset, the neon sign of the Nag's Head flickered to life, welcoming them back to the only world they truly understood. The end of Volume I. The Sky's the Limit, a Trotter Odyssey. Based on the chronicles of Derek and Rodney Trotter. Chapter 1, The Ghost of Millions Past. The sun used to set differently in Miami. Back then, it wasn't just a celestial body sinking into the horizon. It was a golden coin, a 6.5 million pound sovereign being deposited into the vault of the Atlantic. Derek Del Boy Trotter remembered the feel of the silk shirts, the taste of the finest cognac that didn't come from a plastic bottle, and the way people looked at him not as a fly pitcher from Peckham, but as a business mogul. But that was then. Now, the sun was setting over the concrete monoliths of the Nelson Mandela House, and it looked more like a rusty copper, struggling to shine through the smog of South London. Del sat in the back of the yellow three-wheeled Reliant Regal, the engine coughing like a heavy smoker in a winter draft. He watched Rodney, his younger brother, staring out the window with a look of existential dread that had become his permanent expression since the stock market crash. I'll fetch the suitcase from the van, Del muttered, though they weren't going anywhere. It was a reflex, a memory of a time when suitcases meant vacations in Barbados, not hiding from the inland revenue. Rodney, you look like you've just found out the library's run out of books on bird watching, Del said, trying to inject some of that classic Trotter bravado into the stale air of the van. Rodney didn't turn. I'm nervous. Del, this bloke we're going to see, Justin, is he going to be asking about things? Things? What things? My private life, Cassandra, the hiccups. Del rolled his eyes, adjusting his sheepskin coat, one of the few relics of his former glory that still fit. He's a professional, Rodney. He's not interested in your bedroom department. Besides, I told you in confidence it stays with me. I'm not going to be telling him about jiffins or what Cassandra wears when she's annoyed with you. You just mentioned them. Rodney hissed, his lanky frame unfolding as he stepped out onto the damp pavement. They were about to enter a world they hadn't visited in years, the world of accountability. The millions were gone. evaporated in a Central American market crash that had been as swift as it was brutal. They had gone from penthouse suites to the old flat in Peckham faster than a falling safe. As they walked toward the office of Justin, the man who would document their success and subsequent transition, Del felt a pang of nostalgia. He thought of Uncle Albert, who was currently living his best life down on the coast with Elsie Partridge, probably regaling her with tales of during the war for the 10,000th time. He thought of Raquel and little Damien. Life had been a carousel, and right now, the music had stopped, and they were stuck on the wooden horse that had lost its legs. Chapter 2. The Inquisition of a Traitor. The office was clinical. It smelled of floor wax and broken dreams. Justin sat behind a desk that probably cost more than Del's entire current inventory of digital watches. "I've got the basic details," Justin said, peering over spectacles that made him look like a very judgmental owl. "But I want the real you, the raison d'etre." Del leaned back, crossing his legs. "Ah, laboratory Garney. Exactly." Rodney winced. "He means reason for being, Del." "Whatever." Del waved a hand. "Where shall I start?" "Well, we were ordinary blokes until I found that watch, the Harrison Lesser watch, a masterpiece, a national treasure, which you flogged," Justin noted. "We preferred the term privatized for personal gain," Del corrected smoothly. $6.5 million. We divvied it up. Made sure Uncle Albert had a nice drink, a very large one, and then we thought of the future. We went to a stockbroker, Vibrant Ventures, Central American markets. We were making money faster than the Royal Mint. As Del spoke, the narrative in his head was a technicolor epic. In reality, it had been a blur of champagne, bad investments, and a helicopter ride to Nice that had cost as much as a small house just to pick up some magazines. And then Justin prompted. Then Rodney took over, his voice dropping an octave. The negotiations collapsed. The market didn't just dip. It ceased to exist. We paid for the hotel on a credit card that was withdrawn while we were still at the breakfast buffet. We were in a financial wilderness. Del nodded solemnly. "But I'm a creative businessman. I found a solution." The solution had involved a hasty exit, a lot of explaining to people in suits, and the realization that their old friends back in Peckham were the only ones who wouldn't turn their backs mostly because some of them, like Mike from the Nag's Head, had lost their own life savings in the same venture. Poor Mike, Del sighed, remortgaged the pub. Now he's in the nick, awaiting trial. The fraud squad thinks he was embezzling. Never was a man more innocent. He confessed. Del, Rodney reminded him. A minor detail. He's a martyr to the cause of independent trading. Chapter 3. The Witnesses of Peckham. While Del and Rodney were being interrogated by the ghost of their financial past, the Nag's Head was hosting a summit of a different kind. Denzel, The driver, whose nerves were as frayed as a cheap rug, was pacing the floor. Sid, the landlord pro tem, who cooked eggs that could be used as lethal projectiles, was polishing a glass with a rag that hadn't seen a washing machine since the Thatcher era. And then there was Trigger. Trigger stood by the bar, staring at a pint of bitter as if it contained the secrets of the universe. "I'm worried," Denzel said, his voice trembling. "I've never been a character witness before. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I tell the truth?" "If you tell the truth," Sid grunted, "Del and Rodney will be sharing a cell with Mike before the sun goes down." "I hear voices," Trigger said suddenly. The pub went silent. Denzel stopped pacing. "What did you say?" "Trig." "I hear voices. I'm going to tell the judge. Maybe they'll let me off." "Trig," Sid sighed, "you're not the one on trial. You're a witness." "I know, but I still hear them. Mostly they tell me to buy a new broom, but I like the one I've got. It's had 17 new heads and 14 new handles." The logic of Peckham was a strange, circular thing. It was a place where bankruptcy wasn't a failure, but a temporary setback, a hiccup in the grand scheme of becoming millionaires this time next NCM. But today was different. The inland revenue is circling. The Trotter empire, consisting of a flat, a van, and a collection of suspiciously branded electronics, was under siege. Chapter 4: A Wrong Turn at the Graveyard. The news of Uncle Albert's passing had hit them like a physical blow. Or rather, the news of an Albert's passing. In the chaotic aftermath of the court case where Dell had been declared bankrupt and Rodney had been exonerated, mostly because the judge didn't think he was capable of masterminding a bake sale, let alone a multi-million-pound fraud, the family gathered to pay their respects. They stood in a quiet, leafy cemetery. Dell, Rodney, Raquel, Cassandra, and young Damien, who was currently trying to see if he could trigger a car alarm with his mind. "I feel bad," Dell whispered, his eyes moist, "leaving him down there on the coast while we were off globetrotting. We should have taken him to Barbados." "He didn't have a passport, Dell," Rodney reminded him. "The man survived the Battle of the Baltic, but he couldn't navigate a post office application form." They approached the morning party. A woman named Marion was crying. A man named Roland looked grim. Derek and Rodney Trotter, Dell introduced them, shaking hands with a somber gravity. His nephews, from Peckham. "Oh," Marion sobbed. "He went on a bit, didn't he? Lovely old man, but the stories. We love them," Dell insisted. "The wartime sagas, the individual struggle for liberty. A lot of blokes lost their lives, so prats like Roland here could have the freedom to knock him." Roland looked confused. "I didn't knock him. I just said he was a bit of a bore." "How dare you?" Dell shouted, his grief turning into a righteous fury. "He was a hero. He was. Wait, why did you call him Bunny?" Roland blinked. "Because that was his name in the RAF. Bonnie Warren. The silence that followed was heavy. Rodney looked at the headstone, then at the coffin, then back at Dell.